As we were worrying about earlier this week, the Supreme Court decided to get involved in the issue having to do with the eviction moratorium that the CDC set up not long ago, with them last night blocking the CDC from enforcing the federal moratorium on evicting renters during the coronavirus pandemic. It was a 6-3 decision. Get used to that. They're fun ones when the supermajority of conservatives get together. But anyway, the decision now puts hundreds of thousands of tenants at risk of losing shelter while the administration struggles to speed the flow of billions of dollars in federal funding to people who are behind in rent because of the pandemic and its associated economic hardship. Only about $5.1 billion of the nearly $50 billion in aid that's had been dispersed by the end of July. So one of the main reasons that the CDC set up the eviction moratorium was to give states and localities time to distribute that aid. The Supreme Court is apparently deciding, who needs it? And so they've decided. Now we're gonna get into a little bit more of their argumentation there and the response from the very small number of liberals on the court. But Brett, what do you think about the Supreme Court deciding to get involved here?
I mean, the 10,000-foot view is in situations like this where you watch the various branches of government weigh in on what's going on, and you see it break down on partisan lines based on what the party was in power of the White House at the time that justice was appointed. It really comes down to what group of people is the government about. And in this situation, the government is not, I mean, these are extraordinary times. And yes, it does seem weird that the CDC would be the mechanism by which we deliver assistance to this many people, but it is kind of part of something that got passed by the government.
Yeah.
At a time when it made sense to do something that big, and this is just an extension of it. And what's frustrating is it has become very clear through this decision that the group of people that the government is all about is the not just landlords, not mom and pop landlords, but the giant corporations that are trying to systemically change something. And usually when we advocate for systemic change, it's in the right direction. But in this situation, it is turning the entire, it's people who are attempting to turn the entire housing industry into something different, where the American dream of owning a house, of owning your own house or being able to have shelter at any rate, that's gone. And the reason I say owning a house is because they're trying to make it so it's harder for people to own a house. It sounds like a renting eviction thing, but the long tail of this is that now big corporations and venture capital firms are going to own tenements essentially. And you aren't ever gonna be able to own it. And that's something when people say, let's make America great again, you would think they'd be talking about stuff like this. But the MAGA apparatus that installed these justices was never advocating for something like that. No one's like, make America great again so that the Coke business can thrive. And I have to pay rent for the rest of my life. And when I die, my kids get bupkis.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the core issue right now with that entire movement is it's the right-wing populism that is so shallow that you can like punch it in your hand doesn't get wet. Like there's nothing to it. It's just Dr. Seuss and CRT. But yeah, you're right. And who are they gonna look out for? So there are a couple of different interests at play in this issue. So on the one hand, you have hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of those who might be thrown out on the streets during bad economic times and an ever worsening pandemic. On the other hand, you have some of those, you have landlords and even small landlords. They love to talk about the small landlords. Small landlords are today's small business. They used to love talking about small business. They never actually did anything having to do with them. They always pretended that the businesses they cared about were small. Those people might lose some profit, which is legitimate. They might. I mean, the whole idea of the rental assistance is to compensate for them for the lost profit, and we just need time to get that to them. But okay, let's pretend that doesn't exist. Here's the thing, you have to weigh the stakes. Continue it, and maybe, but probably not, those landlords might lose some profits. What are the people who are gonna lose? What are the people who are gonna like suffer if we end it going to lose? Is it gonna be profits? No. Potentially their lives. It's a goddamn pandemic.
You're right. They're not on the side of the small landlords even. And when Rashida Tlaib's tweeted, like, by the way, she tweeted, I'm a landlord and I want the eviction moratorium to continue. They're like, oh, what a huge hypocrite. It's like, no. When the thing that you're pointing out, where the eviction assistance, the money, the reason the moratorium was extended so that the money could get to the landlords. But the state and local governments were so incompetent, either unintentionally, or I would say, look at what's going on intentionally, that they're not paying the landlords. So that argument that the landlords are going to get that they give a crap about them is absolutely proven false. They want the transition to go to the big corporations. They want it to go to the big people. And that's what's so frustrating. And that's where I think a lot of people on the right and the left can really come together when they look at, it's the corruption. It's not the people who own stuff versus the people who rent stuff. No, in this situation, it's the giant corporations funding government incompetence versus people who just want to have a place to live.
Yeah.
And that's wildly stupid.
Agreed. I'm gonna jump ahead to just a couple comments from Cori Bush. Really fast. The majority in the Supreme Court says if they want to continue the eviction moratorium, then Congress should just do it. Which, okay, I get it. That was what we were worried they would say. We knew that was what like Kavanaugh thought. That's not gonna happen. So, and the Supreme Court knew that. So this is a decision that they made that they would do. Anyway, Cori Bush says, we were outside the Capitol for 5 days. Rain, heat, cold. If they think this partisan ruling is going to stop us from fighting to keep people housed, they're wrong. Congress needs to act immediately for every unhoused or soon to be unhoused person in our districts. And she says, tonight, the Supreme Court failed to protect the 11 million households across our country from violent eviction in the middle of a deadly global pandemic. We already know who is going to bear the brunt of this disastrous decision, Black and brown communities, and especially Black women. Yeah, and I'm sure that she will continue to try to fight, but at this point, I'm not sure exactly what will be done. Maybe she's successful in getting the Biden administration to do some sort of executive order, but I don't know how broad that could even be. I doubt it could be up to the challenge that we're now facing as a result of this. The Republicans are not, first of all, the Republicans and probably some Democrats don't care enough about this to actually pass legislation, and even the Democratic leadership was passing the buck about it. That's why the CDC ended up doing it in the first place. And so this feels like the last we're gonna hear from the government on this. Now, bear in mind, of course, that there are some eviction and foreclosure moratoriums that will not be ending as a result of this. This is the federal one, which had to do with places that are seeing a lot of community spread of COVID-19, which is basically everywhere. But there are some states that have eviction moratoriums, including California, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, and Washington, as well as the District of Columbia, that will still have, at least for now, their more local or state level eviction moratorium. So bear that in mind. Any further thoughts, Brett?
I mean, it bears focusing on that in times like this. It is, well, what the Supreme Court did was say, like, listen, you gotta have a law, which that generally as a governing principle, I understand. And you do gotta have a law if you wanna avoid stuff like this. And so everybody needs to remember who didn't pass that law. When you're taking your stuff out of your house because the money they already said they were gonna send to you, that they all agreed on, didn't get passed on to you. It's in the mail, which is run poorly by that's a company, but Louis DeJoy. Any opportunity to think about that guy. When it's lost in the mail, that's the tragedy. And so the people who could keep this going are Republicans in the Senate who decided not to, because they're backing not people who own a duplex. They're backing people who own 1 million duplexes all over the country that they don't ever visit or know about or care about, but they just added to the fund that's diversified in a way that seems to get them more boats and houses to vacation in, but has no house for families across the country to live in.
Yep. Yeah, and like final hypothetical thought, the many conservatives who will be kicked out of their homes and their apartments as a result of this, what are they gonna, like, this is a moment to think about what the movement you back is actually doing. In all likelihood, they'll probably end up being pissed off at the Democrats. Democrats are in charge after all. So would it be wrong of them to be mad at the Democrats, even though the Democrats had sort of tried half-heartedly through the CDC to keep the eviction moratorium going. I don't think it's going to cause any sort of like critical analysis of the movement, even when it so directly affects them. A movement that says they're all about protecting conservatives from those sorts of economic punishments.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.